Good evening, everyone. My name is Magdalena Kaspryshin, and I warmly invite you to the discussion panel from the HoloMind Live Trip Talk series. Sorry for a little bit of a delay, but it's a very, very special evening, not only because we have transitioned from Polish to English, which is noticeable, but because we are honored to have distinguished guests with us. The topic we are going to cover tonight is extremely crucial for me, as some of you may already know. Some of my family members live in the war zone of Ukraine, and supporting war victims suffering from PTSD lies in the very core of HoloMind existence. So therefore, tonight, the following experts will address the topic of war, trauma, and MDMA-assisted therapy for Ukrainian war victims. Let me invite and welcome Dr. Rick Doblin, the founder and president of Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. Welcome, Rick.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you with us, and we are enjoying the journey with you, right? You are traveling.
Yes, I'm going from Zurich to Lucerne to meet a Zen meditator, Vanya Palmers.
Excellent. So we will enjoy the trip with you. The next guest and panelist is Dr. Olga Chernoloz, the member of Phoenix Ukraine Foundation, a scientific advisor to Psychedelic Studies Research Group at University of Toronto, and neuropharmacologist and registered pharmacist. Hello, Olga.
Hello, and I'm very grateful for being on this webinar today. It's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and I'm trying to be of help in any possible way to my fellow Ukrainians now suffering through this unspeakable tragedy.
Thank you very much for that. This is the topic that should be in the heart of everyone now. So we are raising awareness, and we are really grateful for your presence today. And last but not least, Karolina Blonska, co-founder of HoloMind Institute of Psychedelic Therapy, clinical trial specialist, and for over 5 years working for MAPS Europe team as a specialist in the clinical research area. Hello, Karolina.
Hello, everybody. Welcome in this special evening.
Yeah, it is a very special evening, but guys, you have been working on the topic of war trauma and PTSD together as a team for a few months now, but I think that you have been cooperating for quite much longer, right? So how long has it been, you as a team?
Well, I've approached Rick, I guess, very soon after the war, full-scale war has started. So it's been over 2 years, and, I was working on things like to Ukraine and not doors, people behind which could be helpful in this mission. And Rick answered my call and has been a great supporter of our cause.
Well, this is excellent, and it looks like your cooperation has been really fruitful. But we will get to that point a little bit later, because I would like to introduce the topic to those of us, those of our viewers or listeners who may not be so much into the subject and may not share such an awareness as you do. And first of all, I would like to raise the topic of the amount of conflicts, because nowadays we suffer from the rising amount of conflicts and wars arising globally, and they lead to increasing number of PTSD patients in the war area. So what is the social awareness of the scale of the issue of war victims? Rick, could you please start with this topic?
Well, I think there's a growing social awareness, particularly, I would say in America, where there's over 1 million veterans that are receiving disability payments from the Veterans Administration for disabling post-traumatic stress disorder. And the VA has estimated that there's 13 million PTSD patients in the United States. And then we're so aware of what's happening now also in Ukraine. And we're coming together to a meeting in Warsaw soon. We've got the U.S. Congress has actually just for the first time allocated money to the Department of Defense to study MDMA for post-traumatic stress disorder and psilocybin for depression in active duty soldiers. And we're in about 7 different veterans administrations around the U.S. country. And some of our European researchers, Eric Vermetten was the chief psychiatrist for the Dutch Ministry of Defense. The first principal investigator of our study in Israel was the former chief psychiatrist of the Israeli Defense Forces. So I think there's just a growing understanding that there's an increasing number of people being traumatized by war. And then the part I think that's even more difficult to talk about is multi-generational trauma, that it doesn't just affect the generation that's traumatized. It can actually change through epigenetic mechanisms people's sort of set points for anxiety, depression, fear. And so trauma can be passed from generation to generation. So that's what we're concerned about as well. Not just what's happening now, but how many generations it gets passed down to going forward. But fortunately, there's also a growing recognition that MDMA-assisted therapy can be very helpful for people. Even we've had people that had PTSD from Vietnam that are still able to get better. So it's very exciting to see the growing appreciation for MDMA-assisted therapy.
It's really a wonderful news, and I think that this is heartwarming that we have better and better results of the findings. But as you've mentioned, the multi-generational trauma, it's very visible in Poland, I guess, because we have all suffered from the World War II trauma as a country, but also people like me, and I think that everybody else my age, we have heard the stories of grandparents and just, really, really horrible situations that they have been going through. Those people were traumatized and definitely suffered PTSD, but there was no tool for them to support them at that time. There was no means to help them. Right now, with the awareness, we can do much more. Olga, what is the situation in from your perspective in Ukraine and other places?
Picking up, Magdalena, from what you are saying about the generational trauma that I guess every one of us in our part of the world has gotten. When I was a little girl in remote places where the natural mobility is less so, there used to be these stars on the fences by the houses, and I'd ask my parents, what are those? And those marked the number of family members lost in the war. But then, I was a child. I didn't recognize that every of those stars on the fence left holes in the hearts of people who left in those houses. But those stars only counted people who didn't come back. But many, many of those who did, they came back very different people. And because the recognition of psychotrauma at that point was non-existent, they just went on to live lives the best that they could, and in many cases it wasn't very good. So we are reaping the results of this unhealed tragedy, and I want to prevent my fellow Ukrainians from deepening the cycle, and I want to help as many people get their lives back as possible. And psychedelic assisted therapy at this point appears to be the most efficacious form of treatment that we have for people who suffer from PTSD. I don't think that it will help everybody, but I think I don't want to be complacent in keeping something that works away from people who badly need it.
Exactly. This is a very crucial point. Thank you very much. Karolina, what is the awareness level in Poland and in Europe as well, because you have been cooperating with other European countries?
Yes, currently in Europe we have over 4 million refugees from Ukraine. And in Poland, we have 1 million. So that is like what they say, that this is the largest refugee movements since 1940. And we have the first published research from a Polish researcher, Piotr Długosz, from 2023. And the team showed that 73% of Ukrainian refugees in Poland experienced post-traumatic syndrome, and 66% showed a high distress rate. So we really need to cooperate with the organization, and the WHO emphasized that the mental health has become a priority right now. So WHO, with cooperation with the Organization for Ukrainian Refugees in Poland, provided mental health and psychological support for over 30,000 people last year, but we have much more. We need to treat those people. We need to give them support and to reach those people. And this is our duty.
Yeah, I think that this is our duty as humans, just as simple
Yeah.
as that, just to support those in needs. We never know when we might be on the other side. This is it's just as simple as that. But the scale is enormous, and this is really frustrating that the tools are so limited. So that's why you have developed the idea for the program. And as far as I remember, for some time now, Karolina, on behalf of HoloMind, you have been talking to both you, Rick, and you, Olga, and other representatives of MAPS, including the therapists, as far as I know, regarding a special training program for Polish and Ukrainian therapists, right, in Poland, to make this MDMA-assisted therapy one of the options for war victims. And the latest news was that MAPS presented this program to Lycus. And Rick, could you please share a little bit more information about the stage we are at?
Yes. So MAPS has received a donation of $150,000 from a woman who was actually a patient in the studies, and this is to support a training in Poland. And so one of the goals that I have for coming to the meeting in Warsaw is to start trying to explore when it might be a good idea to train, to schedule a training program. MAPS just completed a program in Sarajevo that had 4 Ukrainians, and it had around 15 Arabic speakers. We had people from 22 countries: Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia, the US. So we're very much hoping to work in the training that will take place in Ukrainian refugees who are therapists in Poland, and to the extent that we can bring in Ukrainian therapists from Ukraine. And then the next step after this training, which is a 6-day program in person where people are residential, then would be the next step would be to try to arrange for a therapist to have their own experience with MDMA in a therapeutic setting. And then the step after that would be to start working with Ukrainians and others with PTSD. So we're very encouraged and looking forward to trying to set the date for going forward with the training.
That's really excellent. And I think that we all need that training and moving forward step by step. Of course, it's not so simple, and definitely it's not easy, because if it was, it would have been done far long ago. But definitely it's great that it's going farther, and this is a great news for everyone who cares about the topic. Mental health care for victims, this is a subject that actually, if you ask anyone, I don't know if they even think about that, like average person in the street, or even people who are into medical care or even mental health care, do we have a system of mental health care for war victims? Olga, does it even exist? And if it does, what does it look like?
I think we are relying on the existing medical systems of every country by country, however it operates. I think I think it's a monumental task. But what jurisdictions can start thinking about, because unfortunately, I don't think that humankind will ever get to the point where there are no wars and no people to shelter from them. We need to start thinking what is the best way that we can care for these people, because they are oftentimes in a limbo state. Um, they may be traumatized, but what has happened before they left, they are constantly worried about their families who might still be back home. They're not sure about their future in the country they are sheltering. In many cases, refugees are women. Over 70% of them are women and children. And for moms with young kids, there is, just thinking about how do you ensure that your child is socialized and continues developing, and how can you support yourself and your family in this time. Again, though we're in a stigma subject for many people in many countries, so for victims of war, oftentimes it's something that their mental trauma is something that they are apprehensive about talking about, especially when they encounter medical system that they are not familiar with. I think it would have been terrific to integrate refugee healthcare professionals into the system of care for their own people. So today, I think the way it works is you have a medical system representative, you have a translator, and you have refugee as a patient. But stigma and language barriers aside, it's challenging to communicate your troubles to somebody who has no context to what you have been through. I think I saw some news that Netherlands are looking for ways to integrate Ukrainian healthcare professionals who are sheltering in Netherlands now into the system of care for refugees. And I think it's a terrific idea. So it gives um, dignity of meaningful work to these highly skilled healthcare professionals, and it knowing that someone who you're talking to not only speaks your language, but lived what you lived, and through that has a far better understanding of what you may be going through. So I think finding ways to incorporate refugee professionals into the system of care would be a very useful model of care.
Yeah, and definitely it could be useful both ways, right? It's not only useful for the victims themselves, but also for the therapists to be able to be the part of the implementation of the recovery. So I think it's also
Absolutely.
crucial. This is a very important process, both sides. Uh, Rick, from your perspective, in United States, you have, of course, veterans. This is not maybe so much connected with the topic of refugees as we have here in Poland, because this is definitely combined subject, as you mentioned, Olga. This doubles the problem sometimes, but definitely still trauma is trauma. We cannot compare it to like one to another, right? It's just people who are traumatized, they just are, and they suffer deeply. What is the awareness of this kind of mental health need for veterans, for people who suffer because of war damages in US right now, Rick?
Well, one of the most amazing things is that in America now, where it's so incredibly polarized, and we just see that in pretty much every issue gets politicized, that the healing of veterans and women with sexual abuse and others, of anybody with trauma, really, with MDMA and other psychedelics, it's been taken out of the culture wars, and it's something that we have bipartisan support for. And I think that's largely because of the work with the veterans that has attracted people from across the political spectrum. So I think the awareness is incredibly high. And not only that, as I said before, that Congress has just allocated money both to the Veterans Administration and to the Department of Defense for their own research. So far, we've had to raise all the money from philanthropy or investors to do any kind of work in the administration. But now that there's government money, that's really deep recognition. There was a meeting about a month ago in New York, a conference called Horizons, and the undersecretary of the VA, like the number 2 person in the VA, came and spoke and was very enthusiastic about the potential of MDMA-assisted therapy for veterans. So I think the other part that's difficult is that, I'd say it's different in Ukraine because, it's clear that there's an imperialistic invasion going on. In the U.S., many of the veterans have what is called moral injury, which is we look at not only do they have trauma from what they experienced during the war, but they look at Iraq and they look at Afghanistan, and the people there are worse off than before.
Well, this is really.
Sorry. We went into a tunnel, so the people there are worse off than before. So. Yeah. So this whole question about moral injury is even complicating things, and I think people are especially aware of that in America, where the wars were really counterproductive, and the soldiers had associates, friends, people they were very close with killed for nothing, as far as we can tell. So it's a tragedy of a different sort. But I would say that the awareness is really high in America, and also there's just a very great sympathy among the vast majority of the American population towards what the Ukrainians are going through as well.
Well, the subject is so wide and so deep because I have, we have just experienced the trauma from Second World War. Now, this is the Ukrainian war behind our border. What is the awareness level in Poland, Karolina, in terms of the therapy and the mental health care offered to the refugees and war victims?
So I see that the awareness is also growing. So from my perspective as a Polish woman, mother, and a person who are meeting war victims every day on the street, in the shops, in the kindergarten, I feel that also this, as you mentioned, this trauma is our Polish genes, as we remember the stories from our grandfathers that escaped from the bombing into the forest. And when the war started, it really came to my mind that I was very stressed as a citizen here in Poland, having those people just here very close to us in our border. So I really got very big support from our colleagues from MAPS Europe, and that support was very important for me as a person who discovered really stress for myself, because I was really thinking that soon I will need to escape with my kids. So when it happened, I realized that the problem is really huge and on the very various levels. And the awareness is really growing here in Poland. And there are a lot of organizations who are really starting to support Ukrainian refugees and doing that pro bono and employing Ukrainian therapies for the therapy to treat PTSD, anxiety, loneliness, and all the symptoms that war brings.
Yeah, so this is at least that we can do, but actually the biggest dream for all of us would be to be able to implement MDMA-assisted therapy. And the question now is, Rick, how important do you think the freedom of choice is? Because of course, it's not like we believe that this is the only therapy that would save the world, but it's rather about the freedom of choice and being able to implement the best therapy for the person who needs that. How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel surprised that in Ukraine, one of the leftovers from Russian control is these laws against research with drugs that are in Schedule 1. So the FDA has yet to approve MDMA assisted therapy. We hope that that will happen in August. But right now, the freedom of choice in Ukraine is being blocked, not because there isn't a need and not because treatments that could be extremely effective, but because of laws left over from Russia. We see this the same in Bulgaria and Armenia. So looks like I lost it again.
No, we've got you. It's all good.
Oh, good, good, good.
Yes.
Okay, so I would say I hope that the Ukrainians are open to really thinking about why is their freedom of choice currently being blocked right now, and it's not from any kind of good ideas. It's from laws left over from Russia. But I do think that we owe the patients and the soldiers, those that are risking their lives, to provide them access to the treatments that would be the most effective, that we've demonstrated work inside the Veterans Administration, and we've done quite a few studies with veterans in the United States. So I think it's just really sad that there's this sort of holdover from Russia that's blocking the research and implementation right now.
Next
This
halt.
moment, it's really needed the most. Yeah, that's really what happens. Olga, what do you think about the importance of freedom of choice? How do you see this?
I think I will be repeating myself in saying that it makes absolutely no sense not to have something that works as an available therapy option. So I am very happy to see that the new generation of regulators in Ukraine are recognizing the weight of clinical data, of course, recognizing the need, the massive need of their own people, and making steps in reversing this backwards legislation. Again, something that you touched on before, the moral weight of veterans that has gotten, if not unanimous, but definitely bipartisan support in the United States. In Ukraine, likewise, the moral authority of the army is tremendous now. And that's why I think the first study that we are hoping will become a reality as soon as the end of this year in Ukraine will be targeting PTSD in Ukrainian veterans. So there are talks now, of course, on the regulatory front that would allow such research work, but also the biggest mental health treatment hospital, Lisova Polyana, Forest Glade, they are on board and likely will become the first treatment center for psychedelic assisted therapy in Ukraine, and veterans will be the first recipients. And I'm truly hopeful for the results of this trial and the next steps that it will bring. And these next steps is legal, wider access to this form of therapy for everyone who may potentially benefit from it.
And this is something that we all keep our fingers crossed for the very long time. So hopefully this is what is going to happen until the end of this year. But unfortunately, last week we had this negative recommendation of this committee for the first, let's say, approach. Of course, this is not a final decision. We are waiting for August, but I think that this date has marked a very depressing day. I mean, me myself, I think that not only me, but everyone here in Hollow Mind and everybody we contacted from MAPS, we were all very sad about this 9 voices against, like 9 voices negative. Could you please comment on that? How do you feel about this, especially in the face of that we would like to implement the therapy for Ukrainian veterans?
Well, there's a few things I'll say in context. The first is that the FDA itself has been trying to change the way they work with advisory committee meetings and to end their voting, because they want the advice, but they don't think that having them vote makes it seem like they're more important than they actually are. The second thing to say is that it's very ironic that 2 days before the FDA advisory committee meeting, a Dutch commission on MDMA, which was way more exhaustive, more scientific, more comprehensive, more scholarly than the FDA advisory committee meeting, came to the exact opposite conclusions, that the efficacy was proven, the safety was proven, that they need to implement this as soon as possible in as naturalistic a way as possible. So we're trying to help the various people in the US really understand what the Dutch commission said. But what really happened, and it was extremely frustrating, is that there was a major mistake made by Lykos Pharmaceutical Company. And that mistake was to think that it's all about the data, that only they had to communicate with FDA, that they could ignore the media, that they could ignore this cost effectiveness ICER group that looks at cost effectiveness, that they could block me from responding to Washington Post and scientific journal articles, and that would be good. And so it was really a failed strategy on the part of Lykos. And what that led to was criticisms that were not fully responded to. And so when you say 9-1 or 9-2 or 10-1 votes, it makes it seem like, oh, this evidence was overwhelming and everybody came. But if you watch the hearing, the first person negative would be, oh, I agree with my colleague before me. And the third person, oh, I agree with my colleagues before me. It was an example of groupthink, not that there's this overwhelming evidence. And also, the advisory committee meetings are composed of people from academics, from academic institutions. They're not drug development. And the thing that academics know, and I knew this was going to be a problem. We should have predicted it more, but that academics have this idea that it's a double-blind study and that that's the key way to do things. And they don't fully understand that that's just a theory, and that in many cases, the double-blind study never works. And even with SSRIs, there's a side effect profile. So that helps people tell which group they're in. So it's a way to approach it. But even if you fail it don't mean you can't trust the data at all. So we had a bunch of people who didn't really understand that, this my PhD was on, in part, how to deal with the double-blind problem. MAPS spent 8 months negotiating with the FDA on how to do double-blind study. And we spent 16 years trying to find the perfect active control and couldn't find one. So we came to the best solution that we could, and actually FDA chose the design. So I think that the advisory committee meeting is not representative. The other thing to say is that in 1/3 of the time, on average, the FDA approves a drug even after the advisory committee has said no. And in this case, the advisory committee meeting, their decisions were so misinformed, mistaken. There was even one woman that was saying, why do we even need new treatments? The treatments we have for PTSD work great and they work faster. And it just was blind to actual clinical realities. and also blind, I think, to real scientific realities. Our therapy, I think some of the people were saying that the problem was in part that we were combining, a drug with psychotherapy, and the FDA has never regulated that before. But we do have a very standardized therapy, and people just couldn't understand that. So I think it was something that we're doing that's so new. And so we're very hopeful, actually, that it's more than 50-50 chance, probably significantly more, that the FDA will still approve, even though the advisory committee recommended against. But it really goes to point out that what we're trying to do requires an enormous amount of public education. There's been so much.
Oh, now we lost
About
Rick for a
MDMA
moment.
neurotoxicity.
But
Oh, great.
oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Back. Okay, so I'm just saying that the lesson is that, and this is why I'm very hopeful for the conference in Warsaw, is that the lesson is that it's not just about the scientific data. It really has to be accompanied with a lot of public education, and for people to see, how does this therapy work? How do we train the therapists? And so for Lycos, which was basically brought in a bunch of traditional pharma people, and they were not properly supervised, so that the policy became, oh, let's just do this the traditional pharma way, and we don't have to communicate to the public, and let's sort of have a quiet period. So I think it would be the wrong message to say, oh, this was really, it means the FDA is going to say no. I think there's better than 50-50 chance. The way I've been saying it actually is that the FDA is going to say yes, for sure. It's just a question of what. We have enormously statistically significant evidence of efficacy. The safety record is excellent. And so the question is, the FDA, it seems like, really wants to approve it. It was the advisory committee meeting that went off the rails. So the question is really, what is the FDA going to say yes to? So will it be additional information required? Will it be approval, but more data gathering over the first group of subjects? That we don't know. But now there's a full-fledged effort for a political strategy, a scientific strategy, a media strategy, a regulatory strategy. And we've been, it's 38 years that I've been working on this, and we faced a lot more difficult situations than we have now, because now we have the advantage of incredible phase 3 studies with really powerful data, and all sorts of people inside the VA, inside the Department of Defense, and global studies that we've done. So we're in a better position than we've ever been. And so I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to turn this around and be able to bring this both to FDA approval and then to Ukraine. But I do hope that Ukraine starts thinking about, why do you want to be subject to laws from Russia that.
Okay, we had a little bit of a break. Rick, are you back with us? Okay, could you please finish the last sentence, because we lost you for a moment. Rick, are you back with us? Oh, okay. So we have been suffering a little bit of a communication problem, but that's okay. I'm quite sure that Rick is going to be back in a second. I myself, I also had a very similar feeling to what Rick has said, that the tool that we are using to measure such a revolutionary method of treatment and therapy, is being measured with the very traditional. The therapy that is very revolutionary is being measured with the very traditional tools, and I think that there is. It's not only the revolution in therapy that is needed, but also the revolution in the way that we are measuring the results. That we need another approach. We need completely new tools and completely new measurements to check the appropriateness of this therapy. So I think that this revolution is needed on many stages of this case, not only with the therapy itself. I think that the MDMA-assisted therapy brings much more topics to work on in terms of changing and bringing them to another level. So I'm quite sure that we just need an improvement in the way that we look at those types of therapies, and the modern way of looking at the topic. So I'm super happy that we are so hopeful here, and I'm also myself just convinced that this is going to happen. This is why you have been devoting all of those years of studies to that. So of course, this is definitely happening. And some obstacles, they must happen. As you said, this is probably not the worst that you must have been experiencing for all over the years. Olga, I would like to hear your comment on this decision. How did you feel, and what are your thoughts afterwards?
I think we still remain very restricted in the way we think about health, and just stepping several steps back, what we call healthcare is in reality an ill care system. So we don't care about what happens to person before the person gets ill, and then and only then the system steps in. Um, but even within the constraints of the existing system, not recognizing how lacking the tools that we have today are for addressing PTSD in particular, and in general mental health, and not recognizing the pain for the patients, for their families, and generally in bringing drugs to market, a regulator weighs in risks versus benefit profile once the substance is established to be safe and effective. And I think that we are failing to recognize this risk benefit profile. Yes, it's not going to work for everybody. Yes, for some people, this may be challenging, but we are forgetting to look on the other side. What happens if we don't treat them? We lose these people to the society. We have people who could be contributing to the society being dependent on the system, and they suffer and their families suffer. And we are saying, well, but this drug may be dangerous. Dangerous how? The data shows in very many ways that yes, inherently, as anything else on earth, there are dangers to it, but look at the other side. And in case of Ukraine, I think this is even more important, both within the country, but also for the international community supporting us today. So the majority of this international support today is supporting our war effort. But one day the war will be over, and the world will need to extend its helping hand in Ukraine's recovery. And if a huge proportion of population is in no way, shape, or form ready to contribute because of their ill mental health, it means that the world would need to pull a heavier load. And we don't want that. And I don't want to see the people of my country suffering. And I think that the world every country has their own problems to deal with. And now we just need help in bringing this on board. And I think that once psychedelic medicine is a legal option in Ukraine, unfortunately, through the load case, Ukrainian healthcare professionals soon enough will be teaching the rest of the world in how to deliver this best, and will have the broadest experience in this niche.
Exactly. This is, I think, something that we'll just be looking at, but we are all very hopeful, and together we are stronger. So definitely all hands on board, and and just we have to go ahead with this. Karolina, you have mentioned the condition of the mental condition of female refugees. This is a very important topic, I think, from many perspectives. Just of course from the basic perspective of supporting people, but very often I think that this topic might be a little bit neglected, maybe not taken into account to such a high extent as we should look at it. You've mentioned, Olga, before that there is a huge load on women, like moving to another country, trying to fix their life for their children, basically, but knowing that the family is broken and that their husbands or partners are left in the threat of losing their lives in the war front. Karolina, I would like to ask you about the situation of those women. Do we have any tools to support female refugees, and are we really considering their situation with special care? What is the situation right now in Poland?
So right now, as you mentioned, there's like the majority. There are women with the children who cross the border, the refugees who are starting to build their life here in Poland. But we need to think that they just left their lives. They left the husband, they left their grandparents because they couldn't move with them because they were old or not able to move to another country. So they left their homeland. And we think that they can adapt easily here in Poland because we offer them home. But the another scenario is that some of them, and I would say that really many of women, they really want to come back to Ukraine to rebuild their home, to rebuild their families, and to do that they need to be in a good mental stage position. So it is so needed to take care of them. And what I observed, the organization are really like starting to take care of women, of kids' mental health right now. The psychologists at school are really taking care of those kids who are crying, and the kids don't know why they are crying because they just entered a peaceful land and they are not happy. But the society needs to understand the problem and their trauma. So what I observe, there's like step by step, the organization are developing to support women, to support kids here in Poland. So there's still big gap, I would say, to support those million refugees who came during these 2 years.
Yeah, this is a big gap, I think, but we do what we can right now with the tools that we have. Yeah, Rick, what do you think about this situation of female refugees? Is there a special, I don't know, thoughts for the female part of the problem, especially that they suffer very often both the trauma of the war itself, but also physical abuse, sexual assault. This is of course complex issue. Is it being addressed as well in the process of the therapy?
Well, it is, and I do think that what we've shown in the phase 3 study, 16 years, is that there is once people have PTSD, regardless of the cause, the therapy is essentially the same. I think what it means with female PTSD sufferers is that they need extra help to take care of the kids if they have some, when they're going through therapy. So it's not just providing them with the psychological support, but they need additional kind of support systems. And the therapy will work with war trauma, sexual abuse trauma, regardless of the cause of trauma. But there's another thing I wanted to point out too, which is really exciting, is this cognitive behavioral conjoint therapy. It's one of the ones that was developed inside the Veterans Administration, and it's for a PTSD patient and their partner. And both are brought into the therapy, and both are treated at the same time. And so I think that's something that's quite interesting to think about is that we often want to treat people in families. And I think as we go forward, we're going to be looking to treating people, even families with children. I think that there will be a lot more work to explore with, female traumatized people, but also helping to try to treat them with their partners and with their children in one supportive system, because trauma doesn't just impact one person, it's the whole family system. And so there are multiple programs that we're now looking at that would really try to treat the entire family. I think also just another thing is that for the female people who are traumatized, it might be more effective in some ways to have female therapists, or at least a male-female team. So that's going to sort of have to do with the resource questions of, will there be enough, therapists of certain kind to help women feel safe in the treatment. Oh, I actually have to get off the train now, so I'll try to do it as quickly as possible.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
That's all right with us. It's really it has really been a great trip so far. But yeah, in the meantime, Olga, what is the situation of female refugees and generally female war victims? Because we've got also female veterans. It's a huge variety. What is the situation right now from your perspective?
I think it's there are two components to this. One is that the war is ongoing. So the source of this pain and anxiety is not resolved. It seems that MDMA may have a protective effects against trauma, and this is something that came out of the tragedy of October. Published recently that people who were attending this music festival and who were taking MDMA recreationally, their mental health outcomes were better off than of those people who experienced the same events but were not taking MDMA. So perhaps we can treat and give some boost of support against the ongoing trauma of war. So that's one side. How do you treat something that is not resolved yet? And it's a big question mark. And I don't think that any of the trials that MAPS has done over decades addressed that angle. And this is something that I guess we'll learn in this war. And another part of this is people within Ukraine, as Rick said, trauma doesn't affect just the person who suffered it, it affects their immediate family as well. And today, for my female friends in Ukraine whose men are serving and fighting, when they get a chance, when the men get a chance to come home for, a week of respite, they're changed people, they're different. And I think in these scenarios, this combined conjoined therapy is a great idea, because people who suffer trauma and people around them, they don't know that person who came back anymore. So to help bring that person back and to help bring back what that person has created in the family, I think that this mode of therapy would be very, very useful within the country in the future.
Yeah, this is very, very important. And I think that the person coming back, as you said, is not being recognized by the members of the family, but I think that they don't recognize themselves anymore after being traumatized in such a way. The complexity of the family treatment that you've mentioned, Rick, before, and welcome back. It's great that you are so efficient with, changing the place and just coming back. I'm super happy about having you back again. This complexity of and holistic approach to look at the family as a whole, right? This is very important. I'm really appreciating this approach from both of you, that you that you really point out that it's important to touch upon all the members' needs, not only and trauma actually, because it's not one person's problem. It's always connected with the emotional connection of all the members of the family. But how do you think this traumatic experience might be connected with the fact of with the fact that the trauma is connected with, you know, not trusting other people, with the lack of trust? Do you think that this trust could be built again in the form of connecting with the therapist? Do you think that, for example, as you mentioned, Olga, the therapist who is Ukrainian as well, of the same nationality, speaking the same language, but also understanding the problem because they have been to the war area, or in the case of female veterans or people with PTSD, this is also another female therapist. Do you think that this will improve the feeling of safety? Rick, how do you think?
I think that one of the failures of traditional pharma has been to think, oh, if you have PTSD, let's give you this pill, these SSRIs, and it'll impact your mood, and that will be enough. But I think you pointed to the exact point, is that it's a loss of trust. And that kind of trust can only be recreated with other humans who demonstrate that they're trustworthy and they're there to try to help the people heal. So I think the therapy component of MDMA-assisted therapy is one of the key parts that makes it so effective, because there is this building of this trusting relationship with other humans when other humans in the past have proven to be untrustworthy. So I think the human element, and actually that's demonstrated if you look at our research and look at the control group, which is therapy with inactive placebo versus therapy with full dose MDMA. It's pretty incredible how well the therapy alone without MDMA does. You know, in our second phase 3 study,
Yes, we are losing a little bit of a reception. Okay.
And I think that that's because of this sense of trust that is in the patients. So that's a really key factor. And I think there's another thing to point out, which is that when people go back into an environment where they're continually stressed, that's another kind of a challenge. If you take people who are, let's say, sexually abused, but the abuse has ended, and then you try to work with the lingering trauma, they're not necessarily going back into the same kind of traumatic situation that they were in before. So it's not clear how long the war in Ukraine is going to continue. And so what we're talking about, I still think it makes a lot of sense to help people, even if they're going to have to go back into a traumatizing situation. Some people say, oh, let's not do that. Let's just focus on people who are out of trauma situations. But I think that's really ignoring the incredible need, even more so, of people that are in contexts that are continually traumatizing. And how do you deal with that? So that's going to be a part, I think, where in Ukraine, hopefully there can be support groups that would be of the people that have been treated, and they would really support each other while they go back into a war zone and go back into continually never knowing where the bombs are going to go off. So I think the trust is the key, and that comes from the therapist, not the drug, but the drug helps the therapy and the therapist reestablish this concept of trust. We worked with Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And he was the principal investigator of phase 3, not at phase 2. And he said, don't work with people that have a loss of trust from poor attachment, where they never felt safe as a child, that those are the hardest people to treat. And we said, no, we think it'll work with them. And so he added measures of self-compassion, self-efficacy, of whether you're able to be in touch with your emotions, a whole series of measures. And he published a paper recently showing that for those people that never felt safe, never really had a trusting situation, that it's difficult for them to get better with therapy alone. But when you add MDMA to the therapy, they can and do get better. So I think it's this combination of a trusting relationship with therapists and then the MDMA, which helps them process fear and helps them have self-compassion, which is what I think part of the reasons why MDMA-assisted therapy is so effective. But I think this question of treating people in the families is also where you create a deeper sense of trust. And just to add that there's another project in the United States that was quite fascinating. It was with cancer patients who are anxious about dying and their partners, and both got MDMA. And those studies were also very successful. So I think this idea of treating people in family context. The other last thing that we haven't really talked about is that there's not enough therapists and psychiatrists in Ukraine. So who do people trust? Who are the trusted healers that we can bring into the training process? One solution or one approach is to think about group therapy, and that will be, help scale it. But the other part is really we're going to need to find people beyond just normal psychiatrists and therapists, because there aren't enough of them in Ukraine to deal with the scale of the problem. And so that's where, I'm hoping to learn a lot about that from the Ukrainians when we have this meeting coming up in Warsaw.
Yes, this is very important, and I think that also building the community and building the group of people to be able to conduct the training, but also to be trained. This is the core topic right now. I think we will have to slowly finish, unfortunately, because I would love to keep you much longer. I have much more questions, and I think also our viewers would be interested even more in this, but I hope that we will be able to have such a conversation in the future again, because this is only the beginning of this wonderful journey. Although you have finished your journey, Rick, but this is only the beginning of the route. So let's say that it's just a stop.
That's for sure. My journey is really taking me to Warsaw and then to Ukraine, and so a long way to go.
And I like that. This is a really good, route to take, and a good direction. We are waiting for you here, definitely. But before we finish, I would like to ask all of you whether there is anything that you would like to say, or just, just convey some message to our viewers and listeners at the very end of this very important, crucial conversation.
Maybe I'd go, 2 years ago, no matter where you would go in the world, you would see a Ukrainian flag somewhere on the block. And 2 years have passed, and people live their lives, and it leaves the news headlines, and the flags that were everywhere are frayed or faded and taking off and never replaced. So I'm very grateful for Poland's support in general, for your event today. I think very few countries understand it and have it as a first-hand experience as Poland does. So I'm very grateful, and we need to keep talking about not only about the impact of war on mental health, but also about the ways of dealing with it, and not just packing it, stuffing it into our psyches somewhere deep below, and just have it percolated and then resolved. So thank you for this opportunity. We need to keep talking about this.
I also believe that the communication is the most important factor in understanding one another, and also spreading the message and the awareness. And we are super grateful for your presence here and all the information that you shared with our viewers and listeners. This is very important that we all start seeing the different angle and just seeing a different perspective on that subject. And I hope that this is happening right now. Anyone else would like to add an ending word? Rick, you are muted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. No, I would like to say that we are committed to doing what we can, whatever it takes, to satisfy the FDA, to eventually get FDA approval, and to bring this incredibly healing treatment to Ukraine. So I think people shouldn't lose hope about this advisory committee meeting. It was really just, it's not the FDA. They made a lot of short-sighted mistakes. But the main thing I just want to share is that we are committed to trying to do what we can, both to contribute to Ukraine, to contribute to people in Poland, to train new therapists and other healers, and to explore. One of the more exciting things, again, will be about group therapy, treating people with families. And so Ukraine has not been forgotten. Olga talked about how things have been, fading over a couple of years. But from the point of view of trying to heal trauma, Ukraine has not been forgotten. Poland has not been forgotten. Poland has already permitted multiple psychedelic research projects to take place. So it's very impressive. So I think don't give up hope. I think that's the main message for people is do not give up hope. We are trying to help as quickly as we can.
Thank you. We are not giving hope at all. We are just, this is more steam to our engines. And I'm definitely sure that this, this advisory committee decision is just like this one stop in your journey, Rick. This is just one stop. We have to stop for a moment, but we go farther. The direction is Poland, Ukraine. So we are heading farther to August and to the final decision, which hopefully will open the door for the new step in history of treatment. I would like to. Yes.
Yeah, I also wanted to thank you and I really hope for the MDMA-assisted therapy for the special program for the Ukraine will take place. And I really want to thank for all the initiative, Rick, that you are taking place, for all the support for the non-commercial studies in Europe. So I really believe that that the journey with the psychedelic assisted therapy will go also in Europe. And after the phase 2 study, we are still awaiting to know more, as you know. So we really believed that soon we will have the therapy that will be available also for Ukrainian and also here in Europe.
Yes, that's the hope. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm really happy that we had this conversation. It's really meaningful, and I hope that it marks another step in the of this subject, but also in the whole process. So I'm really grateful for today's evening, and let me just remind you that my guests were Dr. Rick Doblin, MAPS, Dr. Olga Chernoloz, Phoenix, Ukraine, and Karolina Blonska, HoloMind. That was HoloMind live trip panel. My name is Magdalena Kasprzyk, and thank you very much for your attention and being with us tonight. And see you and hear you at the next meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.